Episode 145, Dr. Mira Brancu, founder and CEO, consulting psychologist, speaker, and author.
My favorite mistake. It was really hard to pick. I'll be honest. I have many mistakes and many favorite ones.
I'm Mark Graban. This is My Favorite Mistake. In this podcast, you'll hear business leaders and other really interesting people talking about their favorite mistakes. Because we all make mistakes, but what matters is learning from our mistakes instead of repeating them over and over again. So this is the place for honest reflection and conversation, personal growth, and professional success. Visit our website at myfavoritemistakepodcast.com. To learn more about Dr. Mira Brancu, her book, her work, her companies, and more, look for links in the show notes or go to markgraban.com/mistake145. Thanks for listening. Now here's the episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graban, and our guest today, we're joined by Dr. Mira Brancu. She is a consulting psychologist and a speaker, an author, and more. She helps leaders expertly navigate complexity in the workplace and helps organizations make it easier for leaders to navigate. Dr. Brancu has more than 20 years of experience in large, complex organizations, including federal government, academia, and healthcare. She has a PhD in clinical psychology, and she's co-author of the book, Millennials' Guide to Workplace Politics, What No One Ever Told You About Power and Influence. So Mira, thank you for being here on the podcast. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited for us to talk today.
It's going to be a great discussion. I'm looking forward to talking about the book. I like, as much as anybody, could use help navigating workplace dynamics or politics or whatever we call that. So I know we'll have a chance to talk about that. But as we usually do here on the podcast, before getting into other topics, thinking back to your career and the things you've done, Mira, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake. It was really hard to pick. I'll be honest. Sure. I have many mistakes and many favorite ones.
Yeah.
But the one that I keep coming back to, and it's probably just because I wrote an entire book on workplace politics. It's related to workplace politics. It must have inspired the need to write it all down, everything that I learned. So in my first career, before I got to be a psychologist, I was a school counselor. And in that role, it was my first career, so lots of mistakes. And one of those mistakes was that I had read somewhere about, I think I was just getting like continuing education credits. And among those credits, you're supposed to do a lot of ethics trainings, right? And so I was reading about ethics and I started thinking, oh my gosh, are we being unethical in something? I can't even remember what it was. And so I felt like it was my duty as an employee to bring this up to my highest level leader, several leaders above me, just immediately go straight to the top and bring it up. And in an email, very lengthy, just thinking back on it, like you can imagine the painful
Sure.
memories that are coming back, just thinking about what I did. So a lengthy email about here's what I think you're doing wrong. And that needs to be changed. And I'm happy to spend some time talking with you about it and sharing all the things that I learned. And here's all the attachments and, overwhelming. I'm sure, if not aggravating to a leader to receive. But I didn't know any of that. I thought it was just being helpful. And that turned into a favorite mistake. But before it became my favorite mistake, it was like the worst mistake.
So, and boy, I have so many follow-up questions to, I've earlier in my career was very guilty of sending the long, well-intended email that was probably correct, but on some level, but no. So writing the long email, my goodness. So not to get sidetracked on my own recollections of just a mistake, not a favorite mistake for me, but I mean, so you thought this was the right thing to do at the time. This happens with mistakes. We don't think it's a mistake in the moment. We type it, we hit send. Like, how did the feedback come to you then around how the email was received?
Yeah. So of course, when we do this, we think we're in the right, and so I was like, I did something good today,
Right.
And what came instead was my immediate supervisor came to me and said, Mira, the email you sent, not well received.
Now, had you CC'd the supervisor, or did you do the complete
I did not.
end around? Okay.
Nope, did not even include her. She was blindsided by this as well. She heard it immediately, directly from the top person. It was at that moment when she said it was not well received that I started like realizing, and it started hitting me like a ton of bricks, that maybe I went about this the wrong way. So I said, oh my gosh, wow, I feel terribly that it wasn't well received. That was not my intention. I'd love to correct this. What should I do? I feel like I need to talk with her. I feel like I need to, face to face, apologize, explain what I was trying to do, no, Mira, don't do that, she said. And I said, why? I had this need to correct, right? To right the wrong. And she said, no, I fixed it for you. And I said, oh, how did you, wow, thank you. How did you fix this? And she said, well, I told her that English was your second language and you sometimes miss things. And I spoke back then the way I speak now. So you wouldn't know English was a second language unless I shared that with you in confidence, right? And it was really more like code to brush away the grievous error of my ways. The intention, though, was me feeling kind of betrayed, angry, all the power taken away from me to fix my mistake. And now forever permanently labeled as the clueless person who has really no idea how to communicate effectively about anything. That was like how I felt in that moment with this fix or overcorrection.
Well, and I can see where that was hurtful to you. It also has the effect of being diminishing or insulting to anybody who is speaking a second language.
Totally. There was definitely a sort of inclusion, belonging aspect to this where I all of a sudden I realized, wow, they actually don't feel like I fit in. I actually am, somebody who's outside the inner circle. And I didn't actually realize that until that happened. I thought I was supported by my leaders. I thought I was understood. I thought I had been communicating well. And I realized maybe that's not really the case. So you're right. Part of it was very much invalidating and diminishing as well.
So you never did get that conversation?
Never got the conversation.
Directly with the top boss?
No, from that point forward, I really did feel like I had this kind of secret target on my back. I would walk around and just feel like I don't fit in. Like that was the sort of message I kept telling myself from that point on, whether that was right or, true or accurate or not. That was the message at that point that I kept telling myself.
So how much longer did you stay in that first career as you described it before moving on to other things?
I think I probably spent maybe up to one more year. It's hard to recall the series of events, but that was a pivotal moment where I started thinking, you know what? I'm not fit for this profession. I'm not, or I don't belong in large hierarchical bureaucratic systems. these are the kinds of questions I was asking myself. What is my next step? Given how I'm feeling right now about me not quite getting it and not knowing how to navigate as well as I want to.
Right. So, and again, I've been in similar situations. I think back to a couple different jobs, and these are all going back 20 years or more. Maybe there's a more recent one that I've blocked out, but I've tried to learn a lesson around not like sometimes it's easier to craft the email. We can think out our thoughts, we can lay out our case, we can take our time. It's maybe less intimidating than a face-to-face conversation. But I've tried, like one lesson learned from my past mistakes around this is, talking live, even if it seems uncomfortable to bring up the topic, it's a better choice usually than the long email. I mean, have you changed some of your approach that way, trying to do a phone call or a face-to-face?
Totally. And realizing that in most cases, it's unlikely I have all the information that I need to have, and that I need to access the information in order to know what my next step is. So I could have a starting assumption of what I feel is sort of wrong or not working out right or whatever, but not to leap straight into, I have the answers now. I have a solution. I know exactly what's going on. So I definitely learned that I am not in a vacuum. I'm in an entire system, and I'm one person with some piece of information. So what's left now? And the only way to get some of that is through conversations, like you said, the one-on-one conversations, starting ideally with the immediate boss or other people who have more information than I might have.
And I think there's a couple of phrases that come to mind that I've learned through working in healthcare. I'm curious if you've had similar experiences with your time working in healthcare. One is a phrase, let's say if one phrase is just to state a fact. I have a concern. Like it would be really unfair for somebody to say, no, you don't. Right. So then you can say, I have a concern, state your understanding of what's going on. And to your point from a minute ago, leave open the door for somebody to say, well, no, you don't understand the full picture. And then, you know what? That resolves the concern without having this sort of I'm right, you're wrong kind of situation.
Yes.
Is that something you've heard or used?
Yes. And I think often about humble leadership and that approach, which is developed by Edward Schein, humble consulting, taking the approach that of curiosity, and saying, I read this and I'm curious what you think about it. Or have you seen this before? And how do you apply this to our work? And just sort of letting go of, or at least holding my concerns for a little while longer while I learn a greater and greater perspective and different people's observations of the same situation.
Yeah. And there's another phrase that can be helpful or sometimes paired up with I have a concern is help me understand, which is coming more from that place of curiosity or inquiry.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that phrase?
Yeah. And mine is tell me more. Can you tell me more about, X, Y, and Z? This is what I understand, but I feel like I'm missing something.
And so one other question, with your story and your situation there, and this is more in the realm of politics and maybe power dynamics and things that you write about and help people with, that it seems like whatever the valid concern you had about this ethics situation, what should have been a discussion about that was turned into a discussion about you.
Yes.
And your approach. And that is a tactic that organizations will use. They will, in a way, shoot the messenger. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, that's a really good point. I did feel like it was, as I reflected well after the situation, an easy out. Like when you make it about the person and their inability to bring it up in a way that you would have wanted them to bring it up, you deflect the real issue, which is the concern I brought up that should still be addressed. And which was never addressed. I mean, I never found out, never addressed. It just sort of disappeared into thin air.
Yeah. And yeah, so there's this question, and the little bit I've been exposed to ideas from counseling just through healthcare people that I've met and worked with. There's this this question of, and this could apply to coaching as well. Do you want to be right or do you want to be helpful? And I don't mean this to sound harsh, but it sounds like your reflection is similar. Like the email may have been right, but it wasn't helpful. And that's something to learn from, right?
That's right. That's right. Yes. I think there is a lot in there about how it's not just about effective communication, right? There's effective listening and data gathering so that you can approach things in a way that is thoughtful instead of reactive or immediate. And I know that, right now we're living in such a fast-paced world that everything feels like reactive, got to make decisions like, fast, right? But one of the things that I hear often are, greatest regrets or concerns of leaders is the feeling like they cannot make strategic plans, think strategically, because there's not enough reflection time. There's not enough time to slow down and gather enough information to make, smarter decisions that they want to make. And instead, these things happen where there's like quick assumption making and then sort of ruptures that occur in relationships or decision making, where now they have to backtrack in similar ways as a result.
So are there things that you found effective to help leaders create the space for reflection, or to help them share the belief that reflection is helpful and worth making time for?
Yeah. I think these days it's an easier case to make because they know it, because they feel it. They're burning out because it's too fast paced, or they're feeling like the things that they love about being a leader, which is the strategic thinking, is the very thing that gets such short shrift, like not enough information. So they are actually these days seeking having either just the one-on-one individual executive coaching for that, or team development, or strategic planning and facilitation sessions, all so that they can slow down to speed up. Right. This is like a very kind of popular saying, slow down to speed up. And one of the things that we're learning within the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have a specific executive team assessment. And in that assessment, we ask leaders, do you feel as a team, as a unit, that you spend enough time reflecting on your team's performance and how you work together, or spend enough time reflecting on how you communicate and resolve conflicts? Among all the items on this assessment, that's often the one that they all agree that they don't feel like they spend enough time on. And we use that to help them set some goals, like how can you embed this review and improve process in your team meetings? There are very few leaders and leadership teams that actually have a review and improve process for their teams and how their team performance is as compared to the sort of external results, organizational results. But those results are so tied to how much time they spend reflecting on, how well they work as a team and integrate and coordinate, that is one of the things that we often sort of talk about.
And it seems like a lot of what you talk with leaders about is based in your education in clinical psychology. So I want to hear your thoughts on, applications of concepts or methods from clinical psychology that best apply to looking at the dynamics of a workplace and helping people improve their workplace dynamics and their leadership.
Yeah. So one of the sort of popular, maybe overused words or concepts is emotional intelligence, right? But if you break it down, it is about a couple of things. Number one, how you show up as a leader, how you show up for your team and for your organization, and understanding yourself well enough and being aware of what you're bringing so that you're not escalating problems without realizing you're escalating a problem. And so you know exactly how to de-escalate a problem. There's a lot of critical thinking in there, a lot of sort of recognizing when you're pushing too hard and knowing how to meet people where they are in order to understand where you are, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, perspective taking, all of that is within sort of these concepts of emotional intelligence. That is one of kind of three drivers that I think about when I think about like workplace dynamics. The second, I think we touched on several times, which is the systems level thinking, that you're not in a vacuum, right? That even with my own story, I didn't realize that there's layers of things happening and I'm just one at one layer, right? There's agendas. There's what teachers want for students and what students want for themselves. There's what parents want for students and of the teachers. There's the administrators and what they want of the teachers, of the parents, and the students. There's the school district, right? And the larger the organization, the more you have to understand. Sometimes these, they're called stakeholders, right? Sometimes they're called, team members, whatever. But you have to understand the different perspectives in the system and how your decision making is going to impact that. Interestingly, clinical psychologists, not all of them think in systems ways. Many of them think still in one-on-one, right? The one-on-one therapy, and we're getting better and better at that in that field. But one of the things that I was most fascinated about is that systems level of thinking, that when you're working with someone, you're actually working with, their father, their mother, their brother, their sister, their children, their community, their neighbors, their supervisors, their second level leaders, right? All, and you want to have a sense of all of that. Mm-hmm. The final is how you drive results. And there are many ways to do this, but if you're thinking like as a clinical psychologist, it's asking, how are we measuring this? Have we gathered all the data? What data is missing? Are we missing about information about different roles and contributions that affect that data? So it's kind of embedding the data in the people stuff. The people side of change is really where clinical psychology can come in.
Yeah. And you touch on this idea of complex systems, complex workplace dynamics. I think one thing that often gets talked about in problem solving in different forms is that when you have a complex system, it's very unlikely that there's a single simple root cause for the problems. Does that apply when you're looking at something where people might say, you know what, that department's just toxic, or that organization's just dysfunctional, and nobody can even sort out where that ever began or ended? What are some of your thoughts about situations like that, and trying to find, is it even worth looking for a root cause, or how do we get into that?
That is a great question. And I think it depends on your definition of root cause. Because if your definition is it's got to be one person or one department, then you're right. It's not going to be quite accurate. But if your definition is there is a certain kind of process that is causing a lot of bottlenecks, a lot of communication problems, slowdowns, arguments, then it makes a lot of sense. And that process can probably run through the entire system, and you might not even know what that process is. I often use the term whack-a-mole, which, is like, I'll get a request about something that sounds really like a big culture issue, right? Like organizational trauma is something that I've had some experience with, where something awful has happened and it has sort of shook employees at their core, where they now have a feeling of betrayal in the system or lack of trust, which is, a core issue. If you don't have trustworthy leaders, trustworthy organization, you really cannot work on anything else. And I'll get a request. Those people over there are not playing nicely, and we'd like you to go to just that one team and fix them and try to make them work better.
Fix them. And, you're right, wrong.
Yeah. Over there, right? Those people, right? And I will usually say, I can do that, but this is a whack-a-mole problem. I can hit that down, and I can promise you another thing is going to pop up, and then I'm going to hit this one, and another thing is going to pop up, because this sounds like an organizational level problem. And we can certainly start slowly, but eventually what we're going to realize is we're going to need to have a much more systems level approach.
And so, there are leaders and executives where you might say it's their role to try to help fix these systems. But maybe we bring it back to more of, the question of what can an individual do to better navigate all of this. So again, the title of the book, Dr. Mira Brancu, it's The Millennials Guide to Workplace Politics, What No One Ever Told You About Power and Influence. So I'm not a millennial. I'm too old to bear that label.
So am I.
Is this a book that would be helpful to those of us and those who are listening who are not millennials?
Yeah, great question. This is part of the Millennials book series. So certainly it's in the title, but absolutely anyone could benefit from this book. It is practical, straightforward, simple, goes from what you can do as a leader, and even somebody in an informal leadership role or not in a leadership role at all, to be as proactive as possible in creating the most positive work environment for yourself and around you. What do you do, though, if you have to be in a reactive role because some people around you are misusing the system for personal gain? And that means misusing you in some ways, and creating a lot of trust issues or whatever. And then at the end of it, we end with, what if you've tried everything, and how do you know when it's time to move on? Now, ideally, my goal is to teach everyone how to be as proactive as possible, so that you never get to the point where you're so miserable that you feel like you need to go. But I also don't want people to be miserable in their environments. But in terms of your first question, like what can one person do? Surprisingly, a lot. It goes back to those three principles that I mentioned, which is first, you develop your emotional intelligence. You can do that through coaching, through therapy, through assessments, through supervisors, through mentors. There, personal training. There's so many ways to keep developing yourself so that you understand yourself well enough to know how to be effective when you walk into a room, to de-escalate problems and problem solve and demonstrate your critical thinking, really. Then understanding like the systems level. So how can I impact and influence the system, no matter whether I have a formal leadership position or not? There are a lot of ways that you can start building a team, even if it's not a formal team, and come at things thinking about not just your own personal growth in the company, but also what can I do to make an impact beyond me, and sort of move the needle in creating that positive work culture. And people gravitate towards that. People are needing and missing and wanting that kind of integrity and trustworthiness in whether you're an official leader or not. And then the final is, how do I drive results? What information do I need to gather so that I am well equipped to make the right decisions and help my leaders make better decisions, but not in the way that I used to do it, not in the way that I used to do it, in more effective ways.
Yeah. There's a lot of opportunities to learn from our own mistakes, but at the same time, reading about mistakes others have made or listening to them in a podcast can maybe help people avoid that same trap, as long as they're learning from whatever individual mistakes we're all going to have something to learn from.
I'm so glad that you are doing this podcast. I think too often we have this need to demonstrate invulnerability. And I feel like we learn so much more when we hear really effective leaders share their mistakes and what they learned and how they grew from them. So I'm glad that you're showing that on your podcast all the time. That is a really important message.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you were willing to share your story, and I'm thankful that other guests would. One other question I wanted to ask you before we wrap up. I remember a younger version of me saying something like, I just want to do my work, and I just want to make an impact. I don't want to deal with office politics, and getting some coaching from people, including my wife, who if she's listening, she'll remember this. Basically saying, well, that's unrealistic. The reality is that there are going to be politics in an organization, and instead of just trying to ignore it, you need to get better at navigating that. I see you nodding your head.
I used to be like that too. Like, keep me out of it. None of my business. This stuff is, ugly, dirty, disgusting, nasty workplace politics. But what I grew to realize is, if you just think about it in a very neutral way around, how can I feel effective and make a difference that is positive, that I feel good about where I work and I help others feel that too. And then you can do it. It's extraordinarily empowering, and way more empowering than sitting complaining about how everyone around you sucks.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good reminder of reframing. I mean, politics gets a bad rap, whether it's just in society or in an organization. We think about like the negative things that are considered quote unquote political in the workplace. And it could be more a matter of like, well, I don't want to emulate that bad behavior. That's right. Sometimes being labeled as politics. But if we're going to define it in terms of like, trying to positively influence others, that's not really something to shy away from.
That's right. Yeah. So you can change the word politics to positive people dynamics, or, creating, a honest community of people with integrity. that's politics too. It's just that the word politics has been so marred by the negative side that we forget there's a positive side to creating a good community of people that want to make good, positive change.
Well, that's well said, and thank you for what you're doing to help others navigate this as leaders, as organizations, as individuals. So again, our guest has been Dr. Mira Brancu. Her book is The Millennial's Guide to Workplace Politics: What No One Ever Told You About Power and Influence. And you can find her website at brancuassociates.com. And what will people find there at the website in terms of, you can give a summary of the types of work that you do?
Yeah. So I love working with women leaders. So you'll see a lot of information about how I work with women within organizations and helping organizations support women as leaders. Another area of expertise, you won't be surprised to hear, is team development and helping teams be as effective as possible. So you'll see information about that. And then you'll also see my blogs all about career, organizational development, everything related to all of these things for all levels of leadership, including emerging and inspiring leaders.
Good. Well, I hope people will go check out the website. Again, brancuassociates.com. There'll be a link in the show notes. So Mira, thank you again so much for sharing your story and having a great discussion here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time. Really appreciate it.
Again, for links and more information about Dr. Mira Brancu and her work, look for links in the show notes in your app or go to markraven.com/mistake145. As always, I want to thank you for listening. I hope this podcast inspires you to reflect on your own mistakes, how you can learn from them or turn them into a positive. I've had listeners tell me they started being more open and honest about mistakes in their work. And they're trying to create a workplace culture where it's safe to speak up about problems, because that leads to more improvement and better business results. If you have feedback or a story to share, you can email me, myfavoritemistakepodcast@gmail.com. And again, our website is myfavoritemistakepodcast.com.